Welcome to DesignerDigitals Bi-Weekly Tips, September 6, 2019. This week, how to turn chunky cuts grids into chipboard in Photoshop and Elements. Katie Petit's Cutting Files Chunky Cuts grids are part of the Cutting Files collection at DesignerDigitals. In the last tip, we walked through the steps of filling them with images or papers in Photoshop and Elements, taking them beyond the cutting machine and into digital scrapbooking. Each Chunky Cuts Grids download includes a set of individual PNG images, a Photoshop brush set, which is an ABR file, as well as the SVG format for cutting. For this technique, use the PNG of the grid image that you'd like to give a chipboard effect. In Photoshop or Elements, open the PNG version of a Cutting Files Chunky Cuts Grids and a digital chipboard or craft paper. For the sample, I'm using a chipboard paper from the Spring Meadows paper pack. To avoid accidentally overwriting the grid image, choose Image, Duplicate from the menu bar. You can give the copy a new name or simply leave it as it is, because when you do that, it gives it the same name, but then it adds copy to the end. So I'm going to go ahead and use that and click OK. Now that I've got this copy, that's the one I'm going to work on, so we can go ahead and close the original. Now you want to be able to see all around the edges of the grid, so press Ctrl-T or on a Mac system Command-T on the keyboard. And then you can use these corner handles to drag the grid in just a tiny bit so that you'll be able to see all around it even after we make it into chipboard. Using the Move tool, drag the chipboard paper onto the grid document. Create a clipping mask by selecting the paper layer and pressing Alt-Control-G or on a Mac system Option-Command-G on the keyboard. This causes the chipboard to take on the shape of the grid. So now the grid looks like it's made out of chipboard. Next, press Ctrl-E or on a Mac system Command-E on your keyboard. This merges the chipboard layer and the grid layers. At this point, the grid looks like chipboard, but it also looks very, very flat. So give the grid a chunky dimension by tweaking the layer styles. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this other paper to get it out of our way so it doesn't clutter up the screen. To activate the Layer Styles dialog, double-click on the grid layer in the Layers panel. Be sure to click on a blank space on the layer, not on the layer name or the thumbnail. In Photoshop Elements, to activate the layer styles, choose Window, Styles, and apply a drop shadow of any size. And then choose Layers and double-click the effects icon that has appeared on the right side of the layer. When the Layer Styles dialog box populates, click the effects icon at the bottom left and then choose Drop Shadow. Go to the Drop Shadow tab and tweak the settings. In Photoshop, I use the following settings, but remember that you can change any of these to get the best results with the paper that you're using. For the blend mode, I used Multiply with black in this color chip. So just go ahead and drag this all the way down to black. For opacity, I chose 50%. You can just type that in. Use global light. For the distance, I chose 10 pixels. For the spread, I chose 3 pixels, or 3%. And for the size, I used 18 pixels. In Photoshop Elements, under Drop Shadow, change the size to 16 pixels, distance to 10 pixels, and opacity to 50%. Next, click the FX icon again and choose Bevel and Emboss. I use the following settings. For the style, I chose Inner Bevel. For the technique, I chose Smooth. The depth is 360%. And the direction is set to up. For the size, I chose 10 pixels and I softened by 4 pixels. Under shading, I used global light. For the gloss contour, I chose the very first one that looks like just a diagonal line across the center. For the highlight mode, I used screen with white as my color, so I dragged that all the way up with an opacity of 15%. For the shadow mode, what I did was change that to linear burn. And then for the color, instead of using black, which is the default, I just came over here and clicked on the chipboard and got the chipboard color. And then again, with the opacity, I set it to 15%. In Photoshop Elements under bevel, change the size to 10 pixels with the direction set to up. Now in the full version of Photoshop under contour, choose the first icon here under contour, and then move the range slider all the way up to 100%, and then click OK. I'm going to go ahead and get the chipboard that I had minimized and bring it back over just so that you can see a little bit better how this actually looks with the bevel. It really looks a lot more realistic when you add the bevel and the shadows. These settings will get you started, but you can adjust them to get the look you want with the craft paper that you have selected. It's a fun way to use your grids in a different way. Thanks so much for watching this week's video, and be sure to check back in 2 weeks for another Designer Digitals tip.